You may have gone frame by frame through scenes with Flight of the Cromenockle, knowing it's important, but every explanation you've found still treats it like a metaphor. You've matched characters, compared scenes, even cross-referenced dialogue, and it still doesn't explain how the book actually works. And if you keep looking at it this way, you're missing the one piece that actually explains the system behind the town and how anyone gets out. This video reconstructs the Cromenockle as a complete system, pulling together every clue across the series to show who wrote it, why it exists, and how it functions as a survival manual. So instead of chasing disconnected theories, you can finally see the full framework and use it to understand how the cycle ends and who's already solved it. You've seen the similarities between this children's book and the nightmare our characters are living through, but how deep do these connections actually go? In Season 1, Episode 2, right after Ethan wakes up from having a table leg removed from his body, he doesn't react the way you'd expect. He doesn't ask where he is. He doesn't ask what happened. Instead, he mentions the Lake of Tears. Not as a metaphor or a dream, but from a drawing on a wall. A drawing may not seem like much until you remember that in this show, drawings consistently come from memory, not imagination. That's not just a symbolic connection. Then there's the diner's storage area, overflowing with the deceased townfolk's belongings. In Season 1, Episode 6, Ethan directly compares this to the Cavern of the Lonely Dragon, where unwanted things are hoarded and treated as treasure. But there's another creepier parallel Ethan hasn't seen. The monster's cave is filled with items taken from victims, kept the same way the book describes hoarded treasure. And the most massive parallel hits us during the merry-go-round scene in Season 1, Episode 5, when Ethan explains to Sarah that his parents are trying to figure out where they are so they can go home. And what is his reasoning? It is what the Cromenockle would do. If multiple environments and survival situations align this cleanly, then we have to ask, is the book observing the town or documenting it? So instead of dismissing the book as loosely symbolic, we have to look at it as a literal map of the town's geography, events, and emotional landscape. If you have ever been to this town and seen that drawing of the lake and realized it exists, or cried with those just trying desperately to find a way home, or even held your breath while navigating a cave filled with discarded items and monsters, it becomes hard to ignore that the author Kay Dillons may not have invented this story at all, but instead saw this place firsthand, even if only in her nightmares. But parallels alone don't explain the mechanics. So what happens when the book starts predicting specific outcomes? Could it be outlining the rules of the town itself? A lot of viewers watch the scene in Season 1, Episode 1, where Julie pretends a monster killed Ethan's toy, Norman, and assume it is just a sad character moment, a scared kid wishing for a magical fix to a broken toy. But think about what Ethan actually asks for. He asks for the Lake of Tears fairies to bring Norman back to life. In a vacuum, that's just innocent kid logic, but in this town, we've already seen Smiley return, and we know Tabitha and Jade keep getting reincarnated. These aren't one-off anomalies. These are repeated events, patterns. And once something happens multiple times under similar conditions, you're no longer looking at randomness, you're looking at a system. So, looking back at Ethan's response, death is not final in his framework. It is reversible, but it requires an external force like the fairies. That introduces the idea of control rather than just chaos or coincidence. Something or someone is governing who comes back, when they come back, and under what conditions. And the book already accounts for this. It doesn't treat resurrections as shocking or impossible. It treats it as part of the world's rules. So If the book already describes a system where death can be undone through an unseen governing force, and the town operates the same way, then the book is actually anticipating these events. Ethan's request for the Lake of Tears fairies to revive his broken toy mirrors the town's ability to bring back individuals who have passed, like Tabitha, Jade, and Smiley. And maybe it is fairies, whether they are good or evil, that wield this power. But recognizing these lore parallels is only half the puzzle. How is a little boy surviving a place that routinely slaughters adults? Most people in this town break, they panic, they lash out, or they freeze. Ethan doesn't, and that's because he has a buffer between the horror and himself. Instead of processing it directly, he first processes it through the lens of the book. He asks himself how the Cromenockle would handle this situation, and then he processes that. Take the aftermath of the radio tower collapse in Season 2, Episode 1. Jade is frustrated, spiraling, hitting that point where failure starts to feel final, and Ethan just rejects that conclusion. He points out that when the Cromenockle failed, she didn't stop. She found another way. This isn't how most kids would handle things, but he is just following the lessons laid out in this book. Or look at how he handles fear. In Season 2, Episode 5, when he locks himself in the bedroom after hearing Sarah has returned, Jim uses the book to calm him. He compares Ethan's fear to the Cromenockle's fear of entering the cave. That reframes the fear. It gives it structure. It makes it something that can be navigated. Even Sarah herself weaponizes this reliance on stories. In Season 1, Episode 5, she manipulates him by saying that what is about to happen will save everyone, making him the hero, just like in the books. Every major emotional and strategic decision Ethan makes is filtered through the book's framework. And that's the key, because if the book accurately reflects how this world works, then Ethan doesn't have to guess his way through survival. He has the instructions. Ethan adapts so well because he isn't just reading a bedtime story. He's using its response to failure and fear as a step-by-step guide for navigating the town. It's easy to assume that Kay Dillons, the author of Flight of the Cromenockle, just had psychic visions that she turned into fiction. But are we completely misinterpreting the town's so-called predictions? Visions of the future feel right at first, because the show constantly frames information like a prediction. But when you actually slow down and categorize every prediction we've seen, something strange happens. They stop being predictions at all. Start with the cleanest category. Things that feel like future knowledge, but are really just present-day surveillance. The radio voice telling Jim his wife shouldn't be digging the hole sounds like foresight, until you realize it never actually predicts the collapse. It just proves that something is watching them in real time with more information than they have. That's just observation. Now move to the second category. Outcomes that look inevitable, but are actually being engineered. When Boyd is told he won't find Fatima in time, that sounds like a fixed future, but look at the conditions. She's hidden somewhere no one could reasonably locate her. If the same force making the prediction is also controlling the environment, then it's just a rigged outcome. And then there's the third category, which is the most deceptive. Memories being mistaken for foresight. Jade, seeing the symbol before he finds it in the notebook, feels like a classic vision of the future. But once reincarnation enters the equation, that interpretation falls apart. If he's lived this cycle before, then what he's seeing is his past life. If every supposed prediction in this town is actually just present-day surveillance, a rigged outcome, or a memory from a past life, then it's unlikely that psychic visions explain how the Cromenockle book knows exactly what will happen next. And if no one is predicting the future, we have to look at the one mechanic we know actually bends the rules of time. What happens when we apply the concept of story walking? Think about the ultimate paradox from the show. Julie throws down the rope to save Boyd, but she could only take that action after Boyd had already saved her from the music box monster. It is an impossible causal loop that breaks our brains, but it clearly shows how story walking actually works. It proves that time in this town isn't a straight line, and instead has several closed loops. But there is a hard tragic limitation to this power, and we see it with Jim's death. When a future version of Julie has already tried to change her present timeline, she went back, tried to prevent her father's death, and realized she is trapped by these exact temporal limitations. She cannot physically alter the events that have already happened. Julie's ability to travel to the past and save Boyd, a monumentally consequential action, along with her inability to change her tragic past, teaches us the rules. You can't change the past, but your actions while there can still matter. Putting all of this together, everything can be explained by the Bootstrap paradox. Here is how. At the end of the story, Julie has survived the ordeal because of the knowledge contained in the Flight of the Cromenockle. Eternally grateful to Kay Dillons for writing it, she story walks into the past with her copy of the book, hoping to find and thank her. But she is unable to find any trace of her existence. Terrified that the book won't be written in time for her family to find, she copies the book word for word and submits it herself under the pseudonym Kay Dillons. This is the Bootstrap paradox, where an object, person, or piece of information is sent back in time, becoming the source of its own existence, in an eternal loop with no first cause or start. In this case, no one ever wrote the book. It was always just a copy of a copy of a copy. There is no Kay Dillons. A future version of Julie simply brought back a book that has always existed in a loop with no beginning to give her family the exact manual they needed to break the cycle. Now, we just saw how Julie's impossible time loop perfectly illustrates the Bootstrap paradox, but this exact same mind-bending concept might actually explain the biggest unanswered mystery in the Paradise Season 2 finale regarding Link and Alex. So check out this video right here, where we break down the entire episode and finally answer the ultimate question of who actually created who.